on, Judge Williams.
You're absolutely right. And one day, hopefully, the House and the Senate would get together and start getting busy and doing some effective legislating, and they'll put some teeth into the law and require and enforce ethical guidelines and codes. But right now, you're right. The justices make their own decision whether they're going to recuse or whether they're going to hear a case, and there's pretty much nothing you can do about it other than the public outrage as to what they see. And we've got at least 2 justices on there whose wives have been involved in, allegedly the wives have been involved in very serious political activities, and yet these guys are allowed to sit in judgment and not disqualify themselves. That's a problem. That is a problem in America.
Yes. And Chauncey, for your generation, because you're part of the young generation, what does it mean to you when we're talking about the sanctity of our institutions, when we're talking about being upstanding, exemplars, for our society? What does it mean when you see these kinds of, actions? What do you say to your church members? What do you say to the other younger people around you? What kind of questions, conversations have you already had about this, given how prominent it is? I just want people to be very clear. All kinds of newspapers have been not only writing about the story, not only have TV shows been carrying the story, but the editors of newspapers have been talking about how extremely disturbing this is. Senator Durbin, head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, has explained his anger and discomfort. Even Lindsey Graham, oh my God, and even Lindsey Graham, Senator Graham, has said this is horrific. This is just so out of any kind of norm. So back to you, Reverend Chauncey Brown. What does this mean to your generation?
Well, what we're experiencing with such moral turpitude is the lack of confidence in young voters to understand their role in changing the trajectory of the future. When I speak to many of my constituents and my friends and family that are around my age and younger, they're like, why vote? Why should I vote? I don't have a reason to vote. Neither person is good. There's a hyper-focus on the presidency, not realizing that from the local stage to the federal stage, we have to make the right decisions, as we know the president does do his fair share of selecting your Supreme Court justices. And as we vote, we have to vote our moral conscience. We have to vote. I'm so terrified when I hear, and I know that we're in a postmodern era, where we speak of no absolute truth. And right now, there are some things that are very true, that if we don't get out and vote, we are getting Supreme Court justices that are getting younger and younger, and those that are getting put on the bench, once they're there, they are there for a lifetime. And as we see throughout Congress, we see throughout the Supreme Court, they will sit in those seats until they die. And so we have to make decisions now and sweep this country now with empowering the young vote, because as presidents are selecting and placing our Supreme Court justices, we are seeing that the selections just aren't going all that well. But we also cannot complain where we do not vote. We cannot complain. It is the late State Senator Bill Crawford out of Indiana that says that if you are not at the table, you're on the menu. And
my.
What I realize is that we are continually being on the menu and then screaming for help when the knife comes. We have to get ahead, make sure we have a seat at the table. And I believe it was the late Shirley Chisholm that said, if there's not a seat at the table, pull up a chair.
That's bring your own folding chair. Yes, he said bring your own folding chair. You know,
we have to be at the table.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Amen. And young people got to be at the table. You know, one of the things that Judge Williams, that everyone's talked about, is Supreme Court reform. The last time we did a show on this issue, because they've been acting so bad, this is what, our third or fourth or fifth show on this question of Supreme Court misconduct. Oh, my goodness, Daryl. But the last time we talked about it, we talked about some of the reforms. And it goes to what you were saying, Reverend Brown, because one of the things we talked about is term limits. And I've noticed even here in New York, when I've been meeting with people, this issue, of course, everybody's so upset about, you know, the two big stories out there, of course, is not only the flag and Alito's misconduct. Everybody's talking about what P. Diddy did to Cassie and that horrible video, and how we really got to take on the domestic violence issues better and stronger and really stop this kind of abuse of, you know, young people trying to break into the music industry, all kinds of stuff. But those have been the stories. And what I've heard people saying over and over and over about the Alito, just horrific misconduct, is that they said probably we were wrong in not taking seriously the proposals for term limits, because what we're seeing is that instead of term limits doing what they were designed to do, which was to create an independent judiciary that didn't have the worry that they would be hauled before, Congress and others and just, criticized for their, opinions and their rulings, but that instead they would have the ability to be insulated from that kind of criticism. But now what we're seeing is that they're using that lifelong tenure to actually insulate themselves from ethical conduct. They're using it so that they can enrich themselves, so that they can, become billionaires, mascots. I mean, this is just incredible. So what have you been hearing, Judge Williams, from other members of, the judiciary? You don't have to call their names, but other conversations you've been in with people about this. What are people saying now about real court reform?
Yeah, that's obviously a great question. Something has got to be done, and one of the proposals I've heard is exactly what you're saying: change the Constitution and put term limits there. I've also heard proposals about enlarging the number of justices from 9 to another, so that you can water down the influence of one or two people who are ruining the court with their decisions. And as you mentioned, Barbara and Daryl, the most important aspect of life is justice. That's
right.
it. And if we can't get the highest tribune in the land to be fair, impartial, independent, non-political, if we can't get that, then we're going to be subject to some of what happens in other countries. I've been very fortunate to have lectured across the globe in South America, in Africa, in Europe, and in Asia. And the things that the people talk about is that a lot of the high courts have no integrity. A lot of them are on the take. And therefore, a lot of companies and corporations won't go in there because they have no confidence in the high court. We don't want to get there to that level in this country. And we've got to make sure that we put people on who are going to adhere to moral and ethical codes and guidelines, and they're going to do the right thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Judge Williams, and I'm just thinking this through as you were just speaking. What happens if the court and the court's integrity continues to deteriorate? What is the impact that has on the average American citizen? What impact does it have on us?
Well, obviously, citizens are not going to pay any attention to their decisions, and it's going to have a real problem in trying to enforce them. And it's going to be anarchy and confusion and disrespect of our court system. And that's sad, because one of the reasons that I put in for a judgeship is because I always thought that was a wonderful job full of integrity and you do the right thing. But what's happening now is just a loss of confidence, and people are just not going to pay any attention to the courts. And we're going to find out people are not even going to be filing lawsuits because they don't care.
Wow.
And that is the destruction of a constitutional democracy. You know, people like to talk about that we're Republican democracy, which is true, that we, we don't all vote, ourselves for how to govern, but we vote for people who we want to govern us. That's why we call it Republican democracy. But we're also a democracy that's based on the Constitution. The beauty of the United States was that when the Constitution was created, it was created to make sure that this nation would be a nation governed by law, not just by man and man's desires and weaknesses. But when the law has no ability to operate fairly, when you don't have courts that can enforce the law equally and without bias, and are not ideologically driven in their decision making, then all of that fails. And all that fails, and that leaves us, at a very horrible point. Now let's turn quickly to another subject and talk about governance and talking about what kind of principles are people, governing by. Let us talk about some Texas. Woo! And on this show, we have had many Texas shows to talk about all kinds of wrongs and evils and voter suppression and horrible things. But we have a new issue to talk about. And we are so happy that we've been joined by the chair of the Black Caucus of Texas, Representative Ron Reynolds, who has been on our show before talking about Texas voter suppression, talking about their banning books, talking about their taking over, whole school districts, and just, all the hostility towards Houston and so many misdeeds happening. But Ron Reynolds, welcome to Igniting Change. Welcome back, sir.
It's great to be back, Barbara. Your platform to engage the citizens without any kind of fear or favor. I mean, you tell it like it is. You speak truth to power. And it's so important that people understand what taking place. And certainly it's great to be back with you. Freedom fight across this country on the battlefield. I just want you to know publicly that I appreciate the great work that you and TJC does with Daryl. You two are an amazing, dynamic duo that never actually seek credit for the work you do. You just do it because someone needs to do it, and there's so many problems and challenges. Thank you for your tremendous leadership, and it's an honor to be back on your show with you.
Well, thank you. And we just, we've been talking about the Supreme Court, and I know as a lawyer that is an issue that's been of importance to you. But we want to talk about what Governor Greg Abbott did, and pardoning Daniel Perry, who had killed a young Garrett Foster, an armed white man who was attending a racial justice protest for Black Lives Matters with his black fiance. And he was there, and Texas is one of these stand your ground, open carry states. And so he had his He had his rifle with him, but it was pointed to the ground. It was not being deployed in any way. And the facts, as I understand them, that the jury deliberated on when they convicted Mr. Perry was on the basis that he sought out a confrontation, that he actually, Mr. Perry, got